Now I'm gonna go through this homework problem with you. So the only thing that probably bothers students would be this 3x, because I would suppose that if I just ask you this question, sine u equals 1, what is u? Then you probably should be able to figure that out without too much trouble. So how about we look at this problem first? So sine u equals 1, u is what must be u, so that sine u is equal to 1. So now you do know that in order for sine u equals 1, the u has to be, say, pi over 2, right? Sine pi over 2 is equal to 1. Well, there are other answers as well, because when you look at the pi over 2 like this angle, so this new angle, I'm going to draw a new angle. This new angle begins with here and then goes back to here. This new angle, the angle with the red label, it shares the same initial side and terminal side of these 90-degree angles. So therefore, they have the same sine value. So in other words, pi over 2 plus 2 pi, it should have the same sine of this angle is also 1. Similarly, if you add another 2 pi, which is a complete revolution, pi over 2 plus 4 pi will be the same, right? So sine of these angles, and you can continue. There are infinitely many angles that sine of those angles will be equal to 1. Geometrically speaking, you can also see this as fact, because this is sine u, right? I mean, this is sine function. This is sine function, okay, and so on and so forth. And this is 1. So sine of this angle is 1, right? This is pi over 2. And then another 2 pi away, this is pi over 2 plus 2 pi. This is also 1. And you can see there are infinitely many angles that have values sine of that angle is equal to 1. So that would be the solution for this little simple problem. So what would it be? U should be equal to pi over 2 plus multiples of 2 pi, right? 2 pi times, say, k, where k is any arbitrary integers. Now, time to look at the original question. We do know that sine 3x equals 1. And think of this as your u, is that right? Think of this as u. And then we already solved in the previous equation. We already solved for that particular equation, where the u, what is u? U is actually the 3x right here. So because of that, I'm going to say sine 3x equals 1. What does that mean? That means 3x, which is my u right here, should be equal to pi over 2 plus multiples of the 2 pi, right? 2 pi k, where k is just an integer, arbitrary integer. Okay. Now, of course, when I divide both sides by 3, I'll get to pi over 6 plus 2 pi over 3 times an integer k, right? Now, I just need to figure out what k values, like this k value, what are the k values, so that this result falls in the interval from 0 to 2 pi, excluding the 2 pi. You can try when k is equal to 0, I get, so plug in 0 right here, x is pi over 6, right? So this is my one solution. You can check your solution by trying sine of 3 times pi over 6, which is sine of 2 pi, which is just 1. Yes, it is correct. When k is equal to 1, you see that x is pi over 6 plus, when k is equal to 1, 2 pi over 3 times 1, which is 2 pi over 3. So if you do the algebra, this is going to be 5 pi over 6. If you do the algebra, get a common denominator and then combine those two terms, right? So now let's continue. When k is equal to 2, By the way, this is still within from 0 to 2 pi, and you can use your calculator to check sine 5 pi over 6. Is that 1? It is, 5, a sine of 3 times 5 pi over 6, right? Is that 1? You should check it. Now in case equals 2, you see x equals pi over 6 plus 2 pi over 3 times 2 now, because this is k, right? Times k is 2. And then this gives you pi over 6 plus 4 pi over 3, and then which is going to be, this is going to be, so you get a common denominator, which is 6, and then here this is going to be 8 pi, so it's going to be 9 pi over 6, which is still less than pi over 2. So when you cancel the 3, you get, cancel the 3, this is going to be 3, this is 2, 3 pi over 2, right? 3 pi over 2, okay? So 3 pi over 2. And you can check to make sure that it is sine of 3 times 3 pi over 2, and make sure it is equal to 1, okay? Now you should continue. K equals 3. X is equal to pi over 6 plus 2 pi over 3 times 3. Now, which gives you pi over 6 plus, okay, 3 and 3 cancel, 2 pi. Well, you see that this is already greater than 2 pi. You want to stop here because if you remember that requirement is from 0 to 2 pi. And do you want to try, okay, also one last thing is, do you want to try k equals -1? Let's see. So if k equals -1, you get x equals pi over 6 plus 2 pi over 3 times -1. It turns out to be less than 0. So this is something we don't want. So with that, you can see that we have 3 solutions. One is pi over 6, the other one is 5 pi over 6, and the last one is 3 pi over 2, which for me, it's going to be, this is my solution. So this is it.